Good morning. Oh, no. Let's take a while to settle. Good morning to everyone. Good morning. And welcome to all of you who are here this morning to celebrate the beginning of this hot summer day at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Rappahannock. We welcome and cherish all who come to the fellowship, and we strive to assist all who are seeking to be more peaceful, thoughtful, loving, and generous people. We try to be a place of calm in a tumultuous world. A very special welcome to any first-time visitors. Please stay with us and share refreshments after the service. Our members join together to do the work necessary to sustain our fellowship. We are fortunate to have many talented people in our fellowship and in our greater community who are willing to share their experiences, interests, and insights with us on Sunday mornings. Today, from the fellowship, we have Ruth Nicklin and Christy Van Oudenhout, who will speak to us about a welcome mat, a wedding, and a wave of change. I am really looking forward to hearing that. At this time, please silence your cell phones. And I will now light our chalice. I like this chalice for those who live their lives in closets of shame, for those who furtively visited the bars where nobody knew your name, for the Stonewall riot and the fierce trans women who fought, for the plague, which still takes far too many, too young, too soon. So many gone, so many never lived to see. Out-gay kids singing on TV, out-gay people serving in the military, marriage equality, families formed by intention. We light our chalice flame for all these and for all our siblings of the rainbow surviving, living life out in the open with pride. For our opening words, I have a few quotes that I had the generous help of Ruth and Christy in pointing me in a direction where I might find some words that would be particularly meaningful for this service today. This one from Glennon Doyle. Maybe we can stop trying so hard to understand the gorgeous mystery of sexuality. Instead, we can just listen to ourselves and each other with curiosity and love and without fear. We can just let people be who they are, and we can believe that the freer each person is, the better we all are. And this from Armistead Mountain. My only regret about being gay is that I repressed it for so long. I surrendered my youth to the people I feared when I could have been out there loving someone. Don't make that mistake yourself. Life's too damn short. And finally, from Tennessee Williams. What is straight? A line can be straight or a street, but the human heart, oh no, it's curved like a road through mountains. And now we will have a hymn, number 354. In our hymnal, we laugh, we cry. Thank you so much, and thank you. I don't see any young people in the sanctuary, but there is a children's program already underway. So if anyone comes in, they're welcome to join. This is the part of our service where we ask everyone here to share a joy or concern with the rest of the congregation, to multiply the joy and to lessen your individual burden with any concern. So if you would like to share, please come up and you can put a piece of sea glass into the chalice and tell us your joy or concern. Please come to the microphone. So do we have anyone on Zoom? Yes. Please come to the microphone so that the people on Zoom can hear you.
I guess this is sort of a joy and a concern. Catherine and I are your delegates to the General Assembly this week, and we have been spending multiple hours in front of a screen, listening to lots of different opinions. We had the final vote on Article 2 this time. We voted last night. We won't find out the results until our session that starts at 3 o'clock this afternoon. There were also several items of articles of immediate witness that had a lot of discussion, some of them related to Palestine, some of them related to Israel, some of them related to transgender. And as I think Catherine learned for the first time, there are good, logical people speaking on both sides of everything at GA. So it's always a challenge when you get down to trying to figure out where you're going to vote. But it's always also a joy to realize that a couple of thousand people across our nation and some of the other places in North America are joining in with us to share our UU values and to talk about what it means to be a UU and how we can grow.
And thank you, Janet, for summarizing. This is what I signed up for. It's a little overwhelming. It's hours and hours sitting online on this hot weekend. But I'm happily following and learning and listening and appreciating that there's more than 4,000 individuals who said, yes, I'll be a delegate. And it's Janet's third time online. It's my first time. So here I am, which is unusual these days, but I'm very glad to be here. I went, I guess in March, to the Tidewater cluster of the 7 UU congregations. And that was eye-opening, and again, listening and learning, and I'm really appreciating the connections, the similarities between all the UUs in this part of Virginia. Now, with this, I'm seeing it across the nation through the UU Association. And the next thing coming up for me is in end of August, early September, I will go for 2 weeks to Romania. And that's going to be a conference and trip into Transylvania, which is where Unitarianism started in the 1500s in Western Romania. The gathering is about 200 UU women worldwide, called International Convocation of Unitarian Universalist women. And they do incredible social justice and lifting up other women in so many other countries. And I'm giving a presentation. And it'll be about how farmer to farmer program that I'm such a, which is such a big part of my life, how that helps women in agriculture worldwide. So I'm just happy to be here to see everyone. Lois is still in the healthcare at RWC. I think she's Zooming right now. She very much wanted to see Ruth and Christy talk, and I think we all do. Thank you.
Want to share joy, and that is that Joel, who just walked back in, is here and playing his guitar as we were gathering this morning. It was wonderful. Thank you very much. And I will put this other piece of sea glass into the chalice for all the joys and concerns unspoken that remain in our hearts. And now it is time for our reading, and that will be done by Ruth and Christy. Ruth and Christy are very well known to most of us. They've been here long before I was here. And I'll tell you a little more about them before they do their talk a little bit later. But right now they are going to do a reading.
It will just be Ruth. So, because we're going to be talking about what a welcoming congregation means and what our work as a congregation will entail, we wanted to start you off with a little bit of history. And this reading is the report from the Common Vision Planning Committee to the 1987 General Assembly. And thank you for Catherine and Janet for talking about the General Assembly and what it's like, because this was going on for many, many years. So I'm going to share with you the report from the Reverend Dr. William F. Schultz, who was the UUA president in 1987. We Unitarian Universalists have been the religious leaders in the area of gay and lesbian rights in our establishment of a denominational office, in our support of ministers who perform services of Holy Union. But at the moment, our values and principles are being sorely tested, not just by prejudice from outside our doors, but by homophobia from within. Let me put it as directly as I can. Far too many of our congregations are choosing not to call or even to consider gay or lesbian ministers solely on the basis of their affectional orientation. When we hear questions like these posed about gay or lesbian candidates, quote, "But will she talk about anything other than homosexuality? But will we become a gay church? But will we be able to counsel heterosexuals? But will the community accept her?" When we hear questions like these, we know we are in the grip of a profound terror. Now, I do not want to be self-righteous here. The fear of same-sex love runs deep in Western culture. But I beg us to understand that if such fear is permitted to control us, we will be in violation of everything which Unitarian Universalism stands for in the world. It is not enough to say passively and self-contentedly, quote, "Why, of course gays and lesbians are welcome in our congregation if they choose to come," unquote. What is required is the recognition that gay and lesbian people are already members of every single congregation on this continent. The issue is whether they feel supported enough to make their presence known. What we require is the courage and wisdom to acknowledge our own fears, both gay and straight, and to take active steps to make the welcome known to the gay and lesbian community. Want me to say, we're gonna take a few minutes to reflect on that.
We are a loving and giving community. All here believe in hope and want to work to make the world a better place. We understand that living a good life includes giving to our local community to help our neighbors make the most of their lives. We do that as best we can. We depend on the financial support of this fellowship to make this essential work possible. If you are a first-time visitor, please let the basket pass you by. Your presence with us today is your greatest gift. Thank you, Angel. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speakers today, Ruth Micklem and Christy Van Adenhout. Ruth and Christy will be celebrating 35 years together next month. Many of those years have included the UUFR. When they aren't participating in UUFR activities, they can be found in leadership roles in Virginia's movement to end sexual and domestic violence and to build communities where all of us thrive. They also enjoy time with their children and grandchildren and exceptional animal companions, enjoying good food and good conversations with a wide circle of fabulous friends, nurturing flowers and vegetables and insects and birds, or enjoying a good read on the porch of their river cottage. Well, please say welcome to Ruth and Christine.
Thank you, Carol. And thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to speak with you about what it means to be a welcoming congregation, to share a little bit with you about what it's meant for the two of us personally to be a part of this period of history within the UUA and just within the country, and to invite you into some changes that lie ahead for us and for all UUs. And I will also open with saying Ruth and I co-present in many spaces and have a good dog and pony show where we'll likely interrupt each other and also likely work hard to stay on track, right?
It's gonna try real hard not
So why did the UUA create a welcoming congregation process? The reading today is a bit of a clue to that. Some of you may know that the UUA first went on record as supporting the rights of lesbians, gays, and bisexual people in 1970. And it was that specific and that limited in the language at that time. But 1970, they took stands at their General Assembly and within the wider circle around the participation within congregations, but also in the larger political world. More than a decade later, actually around the mid-1980s, as part of a vision and planning process, a committee got together and collected information about how welcomed and accepted those gay, lesbian, and bisexual people actually felt in their congregations. And what they found troubled many UUs. At that time, there were many reports of experiencing negative attitudes, deep prejudices, and what was described as profound ignorance. To the credit of the larger groups of congregations, people were truly disturbed by this. They truly had a commitment to affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And it was clear that action was required. They spent the next few years trying to figure out how we make Unitarian Universalist congregations more welcoming spaces. To give you a little bit of historical context, it's challenging to think about the 1980s, not that long ago, and in terms of how we think about gays and lesbians in our community and in our lives, much has changed. But some historical context, 1985, right around the time this was happening, the AIDS quilt was conceived and begun by Cleve Jones, who was an LGBT activist in San Francisco. Just the start of that. In 1987, the Second National March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights happened. It was massive, unprecedented, 750,000 people descended on the Capitol, demanding action on both equal rights and responding to the AIDS crisis. Not too long after that, in 1990, the UUA released the Welcoming Congregation Handbook. What had come out of their study together, their work together on how to help congregations be intentional about how to welcome folks of all sexual orientations into their spaces. It centered around 10 workshops. All congregations were encouraged to undertake the process of participating in those 10 workshops and becoming a welcoming congregation. In the late 1990s, almost 10 years later, 4 more workshops were added to the program to address gender identity and to also tackle the intersections of racism and heterosexism with inclusion. Again, for a little historical context around what was happening in the 1990s, you may remember President Bill Clinton signing the Defense of Marriage Act, which defined marriage as only between a man and a woman for purposes of federal law, which I had in here before I heard from you. It was also the decade when tragically, horribly, Matthew Shepard, a 21-year-old student at the University of Wyoming, was brutally murdered because he was gay. Many years later, that crime led to the passage of the Federal Hate Crimes Prevention Act in this country. It was also a decade in which people and policy were beginning to shift. And as I recently learned, while his wise advice did not ultimately prevail, our own Eddie Correa was even in a position to encourage President Clinton to reconsider his public stance on gay marriage. That was the time when UUFR was just forming as a congregation and creating a vision for the community that ultimately included this building and included becoming a welcoming congregation. You want to speak to what welcoming means?
Thank you. Yeah, it took me back to the 1990s there for a minute. Okay, so when Christy and I were putting this talk together, as those of you who have worked with me may know, I might talk a lot about a lot of different things, and then somebody has to help me get it in order. And usually I have someone near and dear to me that helps me do that. So thank you. I also thank all of you here, Janet, other folks who've helped me do that too. But one of the things that really came to me when I was thinking about what do I want to share with folks about being a welcoming committee is really, what's the difference between acceptance and welcoming? And I think that's really what our challenge and what we probably want to work on. I have always felt embraced and accepted. Well, let me say, first tolerated, maybe then accepted at Unitarian Universalist Church. And we have traveled, in our work, we travel around the state a lot and around the country. And whenever we are in a different community on a Sunday, we try to go to a UU church in that community. And there's just a lot of difference, and then there's just a lot of similarities. And I know, and it's really hard to put into words sometimes, and I'll try. I know that difference between walking into a new space and really feeling welcomed, like, we are glad you're here, versus that it's just, there's a difference. I mean, everybody knows what I'm talking about. I mean, you've been in a space, if you're, you know, except for maybe white guys, but even now you feel like, right? You know, I mean, you know, that's what you're experiencing now. So like, so let me just talk a little bit about some of the differences, and I hope maybe we can, we'll explore some of this as we go through the process, ourselves. So greeting people and being kind and offering hugs, and, you know, when we welcome people at the door, and that is a wonderful feeling for most folks. I mean, I know that there's some introverts that are like, I don't need that, just let me come in. But, you know, generally in your hearts, you feel welcome, and you're like, people are accepting me here, right? I'm being welcomed, and we do that here. We do a great job of welcoming folks at the door, asking them to sign up for something. You are a part of us right away, right? You know, and that's definitely a full embracement and acceptance and a welcoming of people. The other way that folks feel, I think, welcome, excuse me, and accepted, there's like all these bottles of water, and this one, I got it. No, there's a bunch up here, and I don't know, I didn't want to drink out of somebody else's.
It wasn't open yet.
Thank you. So you see people like yourself, you know, when you walk into a space and you see other folks that, you know, kind of dress like you, might be kind of, you know, that feel, you're like, okay, I know that this is a place of welcome. Where artwork and titles and things on the walls and all sort of represent a part of who you are. Where the quotes and the bulletins speak to you, things like that. Those are all pieces that help you feel a sense of welcome, especially when you don't often feel that in the outside world. Language. Language is a big deal. And this is one of the, I think, probably important things for us to work on. People you know that you're welcoming when you're using inclusive language, where you use terms like people rather than men or women and men, where you are using appropriate and expansive pronouns, excuse me, and references to relationships don't assume male and female or husband and wife. I'm sorry. You know, and we'll talk a little bit as we go through our talk about expanding that inclusive language to where it really embraces everyone. So that's a piece that's so important. And I'll give you an example that might really make sense to folks. Like, we do domestic violence work. I've done this for about 40 years around the state. And one of the things that when I'm training professionals like medical professionals or a group of attorneys or educators, whoever, one of the things that we have to talk about is, you know, when you all are sitting at the lunch table and you're talking about a friend of yours or somebody in an abusive relationship, and you say, I just don't understand. Why doesn't she leave? Why don't you know, it just doesn't make sense. That there's most likely somebody overhearing that, okay? Somebody in that space who is also in an abusive relationship. And when we are saying things like that, even out of good intention, right? When we're talking about questioning somebody's choices, we create a space that does not allow them to come forward. Right, so it's just sort of reinforcing that shame or that feeling that it's not okay for me to talk about my experiences. So and there's so many places where our language can make a difference. Welcoming, people consciously behave in ways that are inclusive They offer opportunities to share gender identity, pronouns, like we don't have pronouns on our name tags, that may be one place. Now, the younger, that is gonna be an accepting thing for many in the younger generation. I mean, I try really hard to embrace pronouns and things like that, but that wasn't what we grew up with. But it's a shift that really makes a difference for younger folks, and particularly transgender folks. We established systems that recognize, I think, alternative relationships and families, and embrace families in a holistic way. So our how we operate embraces not just heterosexual couples or heterosexual families, or I think some of those traditional things that we tend to embrace, but we expand that embrace, like historical markers and recognizing history other than a history that we might have been taught, right? Curiosity. I think that's the easiest way to be welcoming, is to withhold judgment and just express curiosity. If you don't understand something, if it doesn't make sense, really being in that place and getting your mind in that place of curiosity. Help me understand, you know, I want to learn and I want to understand. I also, as we've talked about with race and understanding race, while people want to help and will help you understand things, there is work we have to do on our own to, I think, really understand people and history in a different way, and really learn about a wide variety of different human beings in order to truly, I think, be welcoming and be people who are genuinely curious. And I think it goes back to that, the worth and dignity, the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and how important it is that we are able to truly embrace that principle, that UU principle, in terms of, I think, not just speaking it, but really, what does that mean? And what does that mean when we are talking about whether it's political differences, or whether it's about understanding difference or other people. Really, that inherent worth and dignity, incorporating that throughout our entire being. That's a challenge. That's hard stuff. That's hard stuff. So I just a couple of easy things to let you know about some shifts that Christy and I experienced. We were part of the original starting the UU fellowship here, and then as our kids were growing and our work life was getting incredibly busy, and you know, it reminded me, we're going back through the history about, I remember when Bill Clinton talked about violence against women in the State of the Union. Did you have anything to do with that?
Maybe, I can't remember.
Maybe, you may have. That was like the first time somebody, a president, somebody in that position at a State of the Union address addressed this pervasive violence that women had been experiencing for centuries. And it was such a profound thing to have that happen. And I remember that feeling of acknowledgement of the work that, you know, we would go around talking to groups all over the state about this violence, and it happens, and we'd still have people back then saying, does that really happen? And then we'd always say, what about abused husbands? And you know, and my wife makes me do, you know, and we'd have to sort of tolerate that and educate folks. And And so that's sort of what a shift in acknowledgement, what how that can happen in that area. But we, anyway, the reason I was telling that story is we were, I know I've got. We kind of left the church for a while because of, I think, a lot of our commitments, but also because we weren't sure this was the space that was meeting the needs that we had at the time, which really were to build community in the place that we lived and to have a space where our kids could feel welcome as the children of lesbian parents. So when we came back to UUFR, which was, I guess, I can't even remember the year, you know, you get kind of old, but anyway, in the meantime, the folks here, and I don't know if there's anybody here who went through the welcoming community experience with this, and folks, okay. So do you remember what year that was, Barbara?
I don't.
We know we gotta call Shirley, Kenny and find out, but, just to make sure we're documenting that history. Anyway, folks had been through that, those workshops, those classes, and there was definitely a different feeling when, when we returned. For one thing, there was a little rainbow plaque out front, which, occasionally gets hidden by the, grass, the weeds and the bushes, but, you know, that was definitely a difference. We were listed together in the directory, whereas previously, and Christy would always point this stuff out to people, and I was like, leave it alone. Worked up, but when in the first directories, Christie's was listed, and then I was listed. She was listed under Van Alden, and I was listed under Nicolum, and of course we had the same address. All this, everything was the same, but we were not listed as the heterosexual couples who were listed together. So when we came back, we got listed in the directory. We didn't say anything, and we were listed as a couple. So little things like that. People were much less likely to talk about, you know, which child is yours and which child is hers, and, you know, asking those questions. If it was in a larger context, a bigger conversation. And then the other one was, and I'll end with this one because this was one of those experiences that helped us, I think, really think about, is this the place where we belong, and can people grow and change? We've been to several of the leadership retreats. So the board used to go off and take a couple of, you know, like members and board members, and we do our planning, and we spend like a long weekend together, sort of building a relationship and planning. And one of the things, this was after we came back, right? We went to one of the retreats, and it was at Brown Mobley's house in the Outer Banks. And it's a big, I don't know how many people have done that. It's a great big house, you know, those houses in the Outer Banks with all those bedrooms, you know, like 8 bedrooms. It's one of those. So we got there, and maybe this was before, but it was before. We got there, and so they had a room assignments. And so all the couples, you know, were in each, it had a room, and then there was a room, you know how those cottages are, there's one room with all the bunk beds. That all the kids, you know, that's where the kids are supposed to go. So I think there were 2 other single people there. So they were assigned to that room, and Christy and I were assigned to that room. And I was like, oh, let's sleep on the bunk bed. But you know, it's 3 days, you can do that, you can get away with that. Christy was like, So she said she went up and talked to, it was actually, I think, I can't remember if it was whoever was making the room assignment. She's like, listen, we're not gonna sleep in these bunk beds. We're a couple. We, you know, we'd like to be able to sleep together. So they gave us a fold-out couch We got a fold out couch, because all the rooms were taken, all the couples' rooms were taken, and we were like, okay, well, we can do the fold out couch. But the best thing about it was that it was right outside of Elaine and Bob Weekly's bedroom. And this probably, I don't think I've even talked to Bob, and now we talked to Elaine about, what was going on for him, but every morning, of course, he would get up, Bob would get up very early in the morning, go out and run or something, and we would wake up and he'd have to walk right past us in bed. And like the first morning, he's like, and they said, good morning, Bob. Like the second morning, so he went over and by the end of the weekend, he was sitting on the foot of the bed talking to us in the morning before he went out for his run. And I think that we were able to have a conversation about that. But when we came back after the welcoming classes and workshop, and the next retreat we went to, we also got one of the rooms that all the other straight couples got. So, and nobody said anything. So it's just an assumption that you are together, we're gonna give you the room. And those are just a few little, I think, things that we noticed after the congregation had gotten some education about what that is. And it really is about that education. All right, so Christy has me timed here, and I'm gonna stop and turn it over to you. I gotta go over.
So UUFR recently celebrated our 25th anniversary, right? And we talked about all the big milestones, including this gorgeous building, our home of our own. One of the very special things for us in coming back and this building being here is that it made it possible for us to have a really welcoming space in which to bring together our family and friends to witness the happy event when we decided to get married in celebration of our 25th anniversary. We'll talk, over refreshments or at a cocktail party or something about how LGBTQ folks choose anniversaries. It's always an interesting, everybody pre the right to get married does it a little differently. But that was 2014 that we did that. So what was happening between 2000 and 2014? There was a lot of change happening across the country. Here in Virginia, we were particularly involved in the 2005, 2006 great debate over marriage rights here in Virginia, what we were going to do. It was quite an experience. It was quite a time to live through as an activist with people really committed to social justice and with a circle of friends who we love dearly, but where we were continuously in spaces where people were debating our rights to be equal, and felt very comfortable doing that. It was an odd experience that I think I will never forget. And it's definitely increased my capacity, I think, to be aware of that with other folks. In Virginia, the General Assembly was trying to pass a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage and denying any legal status for relationships of unmarried individuals that intends to approximate the design, qualities, significance, or effects of marriage. For a constitutional amendment to become law in Virginia, it has to pass in 2 sessions of the General Assembly with an intervening election. So it has to pass in a year, and then there has to be an election, the opportunity for people to choose new folks. It has to pass again, and then it has to go to the voters, and it has to pass there as well. We were active in both the Violence Against Women movement and with Equality Virginia to work to oppose the amendment. In the Violence Against Women movement, we had huge concerns about the rights of all non-married people if this broad constitutional amendment were to pass. And of course, Equality Virginia was concerned and advocating for equal rights for LGBTQ people. The goal at Equality Virginia was to rally 1 million votes to block the amendment. It was believed, there were some great political strategists on board. It was believed if we could get to 1 million votes, it could be blocked. We did get to 1 million votes. But damn if the opposition did not have record turnout. And that fear of gay marriage just carried the day. And the amendment was approved. It became law in Virginia, January 1st of 2007. And I want to just pause for a second to emphasize this prohibition was not something that has been on the books for centuries in Virginia. This prohibition was adopted and became law in 2007. So back to our wedding for a second. We had a lot of friends. We'd had many friends over the years who traveled to other states to be married during that time period, as one state after another made a different decision than Virginia, and in fact enshrined the right to be married. Folks were traveling and getting legally hitched. There were also, and always had been throughout our relationship and our friendships, people who held ceremonies without being concerned about the legal side of things, but who really just wanted to affirm the profound experience they were having of commitment and faith in each other in their relationships. We spent a lot of hours debating the question of whether and why we wanted to get married. On the con side, we'd both been married before. We didn't have any longing to dress up and have our walk down the aisle. That was no longer a factor. And in our work, we had been wrestling for decades with the institution of marriage and the history of the ownership of women and children, and how marriage was being used, had been used, was very successfully used as a tool against women and children, day in and day out. So there was a pride and a freedom in not participating in that institution. And that is alive and well in the LGBT community, as it should be. But we also had the experience of being a couple and a family with no legal recognition, and we really faced some big challenges. Early on, we had to face a challenge around child custody. Initially, we sort of worked things out, but my ex got involved in a new relationship. And next thing you know, we were being invited out when the kids didn't come home from their visit with dad and told they won't be coming home. You have a choice to make. You can be a lesbian or you can be a parent. You can't have both those things, right? Consulting an attorney, it became really clear that there wasn't going to be a leg to stand on in a court of law. And we were going to have to find another way to work this out. I will say that over time, at the time, I couldn't have said anything positive about this. But over time, the fact that we had to figure out how to work it out without the courts became a good thing. And it also made me start to question why we use the courts to ever make decisions about what's best for kids and families. Yeah, but there's still some deep scars there. In my early 30s, I was diagnosed with cancer. We found ourselves losing more sleep over the legal arrangements than over the health outcomes. It was a time when we were pretty sure that without an arsenal of legal support, Ruth wasn't even going to be able to visit with me in the hospital, much less be there at my side. I wanted her to be the person who could make decisions if I couldn't make them for myself. And, you know, we wanted to preserve her relationship with our kids who we've been raising together for a number of years. If something happened to me, we couldn't take any legal right for granted. And even with all of those wonderful folder of legal documents that we carried with us everywhere, we still had to really fight for our rights to be treated. The list goes on, but I'm gonna keep it short there and say, we found ourselves really thinking about both the past and the future, about what it would mean to have our relationship legal and respected. And we thought a lot about our well-being as a couple. And finally, we landed on the decision to get married, in the hopes that before we died, at least, when we knew we'd be dealing with all that legal stuff again, that our marriage might be recognized by Virginia. So on July 14th, 2014, which is the date we would celebrate our 25th anniversary, we drove up to Maryland, where marriage had become legal the year before. We got married in the Charles County Courthouse. Everybody from the second we walked in the door was so welcoming and celebratory.
They had had some classes.
Oh my God, yeah. They've done a supercharged course. It was amazing. It was such a positive experience, and we had no idea what we were walking into. So that was pretty awesome. On July 19th, a few days later, we exchanged vows here at UUFR in a service that was led by a dear friend who's an Episcopal minister. Elaine Cameron Miles was actually lined up to do our service, and unfortunately was not able to do that due to illness. So each of our adult children chose a reading or a piece of music, shared words of blessing. It was such a powerful experience. We were joined by family and friends from near and far. Just such an amazing day. We brought our I guess you'd call it a wedding album, our wedding scrapbook, in case anybody's curious, let's just see pictures. We continue to be grateful that day was possible. And we also know it was an incredible gift. We continue to be aware that couples only a decade or two older than ourselves had to navigate a much more challenging road and could not safely make a lot of the choices we got to make. We were only able to do so because of the legacy of courage and pride that they laid out for us. As it turns out, we only had to wait a year for the Supreme Court decision that made our marriage legal in Virginia and throughout the US. And we're also mindful of the fact that it's still in the Virginia Constitution, that there's a ban. There have been multiple attempts to change that. None of them have been successful. And we know that rights that have been granted by court decisions, as we're all experiencing, can be taken away by court decisions as well. So back to the welcoming congregation program, and I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to zip through this a little bit. A lot's changed since 1987. We have a much more expansive and nuanced understanding of both gender identity and sexual orientation. And I think we now understand that that's just going to continue to evolve. Like, relax, stop worrying about the initials. They're going to, whoops, they're going to grow, they're going to change, they're going to, yeah, be curious, ask questions. LGBTQI plus communities have fought for and achieved equal rights on a lot of fronts, but homophobia has not gone away. All right. 2022, the FBI reported increases of nearly 14% in hate crimes based on sexual orientation and 33% in hate crimes based on gender identity. Much of that violence was directed at people of color. In 2018, a Stonewall survey of young people found that fewer than half of the LGBTQI people felt able to be open about their sexual orientation or gender identity with their family. There's still a lot of work to be done, which is why it's imperative that those of us in UU congregations do our part. We need to be sure that these are spaces that are respite from the weight of being misunderstood. For people who have trouble just being themselves out in the world. The UUA has updated the Welcoming Congregation program and is now asking, rather than just going through a course of workshops, that you incorporate some elements of this annually into everything that congregations do. The renewal process that will become an annual renewal process includes at least 2 dedicated services during the year. So here's one. We've got till December to do it. At least 6 days of observance. So at least 6 times during the year, we're paying attention to days that are significant to the LGBTQ plus community, where a prayer, a story for all ages, a chalice lighting, not necessarily an entire service, but there's some element that recognizes whether it's Pride Month or National Coming Out Day, the Trans Day of Remembrance, and other significant cultural events. It includes at least one adult religious education activity. It can be a book discussion, it can be a movie discussion, it can be a talk back session about the issues and needs of the LGBTQ community. And it has to engage at least 10% of your members. And it includes supporting a welcoming project, donating either finances or time to an LGBTQ plus organization in the community for a campaign or project that's important to them. And there's also encouragement to make your space available for those community based groups. Ruth and I have agreed to organize these activities to get us on the path of doing this annually and kind of figure out how we do it and get us renewed for 2024. I put something in the chalice. I know not everybody needs the chalice. Thank you, Mike, for responding. An invitation, we'd love to have a few people join us in figuring out what to do, when to do it, and helping to make it happen. We're hoping to gather people for the first time in July to work on that. And I'll turn it over to you.
To finish up.
God. All right. So thanks for sitting through all this, listening to what a welcoming congregation is and does. And I hope that we'll have some folks who will join us in putting this process together. When I read, I think Janet approached me a few months ago, or actually, it might have been more than that, about, can you check out the welcoming congregation stuff and make sure we're up to date and anyway, it's like not just a series of 10 workshops. It's, it really is, and I think, probably much more meaningful and makes a much more significant change about how to become a renewing, welcoming congregation, and you get a certificate and all that. It says you're a welcoming congregation. But it really is, how do we understand the expansiveness of sexual orientation, gender identity, all the things that, all the changes that have happened as we've grown, and how do we truly incorporate that? And it's a long sort of detailed list of things to do. But as I was reading through that, one of the things that, and this is really what I want to wrap us up with, is how do we expand that beyond LGBTQ plus IA? And I still forget some of the initials, and I was hoping my grandson would be here today because he is an expert and reminds me of things. But how do we really, the goal of UFR is welcoming all people, really embracing and welcoming everybody. And how do we expand that? How do we use the Welcoming Congregations Guide to make that expansive to everybody? Because we are at a time right now where I believe a lot of our some of the things that are happening, particularly for rural white people, and particularly rural white men who have traditionally, or men who've traditionally been at the center of everything, right? And everything came from that experience, the experience of white heterosexual men. And they're feeling a little replaced right now, some, not all. Some have worked through their shit, some have great wives that support them, and some have, you know. But it's hard when you have had privilege, not necessarily recognize it, and then all of a sudden you see other people stepping into that circle, right? So we want to make sure that everybody feels that, and we can talk about this, and we can recognize how important it is for everybody to be seen and heard. So we'll be, I think, trying to do some work around that as we go through this. 2 books I want to tell you about that are old books. I think probably came out in the late 80s, early 90s, and I don't even know if they're still published, but they feel very relevant today. And one is called Homophobia, A Weapon of Sexism by Suzanne Farr. And the other one that she wrote that follows up on that is In the Time of the Right, where in those books she really talked about what was happening and really sort of predicted this experience, and how we will be back again fighting some of the same battles. So we have both the capacity and the obligation to find a way to live up to our principles of upholding the inherent worth and dignity of all people, stepping aside to make the spaces that are necessary to widen that circle. I want to close with these words. What we require is the courage and wisdom to acknowledge our own fears and to take active steps to make the welcome known to all in the community. We all have a time for discussion.
Oh, yeah, we're doing shit.
Come on here. Come on here. You're better at answering questions.
Christy and Ruth, thank you for that extraordinarily powerful talk. And also the pain and the love in your lives together is palpable. Thank you so much. And we do so have time for discussion. And
Or the good photos of the two of you together. Taking off away from the living. Thank you.
I'm not feeling like here. We're filling the batteries.
you want to take pictures now?
No,
Okay,
no.
thanks. Thank you, Jeff, our savior.
You thank us for sitting here. And that's all wrong. I mean, you're welcome. But it's for us to thank you for putting this all together and doing it so well and such heart. Thank you. I know we all do.
Absolutely, great. The thing about curiosity, huh? I'm always afraid, when does it get over into nosiness?
If you suspect it's nosiness,
It is. I might suspect it, but who can?
yeah, I think the key is, do you intend to listen and change and learn from what you hear? And if you're open to that, ask the question, and if you're not, it's okay, don't ask.
Okay.
I totally agree with you all about education. Recently, my own daughter said to me, Mom, if I have a baby and something happens to me, it goes to you because you're the biological, not my wife. And I was like, what? You know, and that just, it still is, it bothered me a lot, because I'm like, but that's your wife. And so definitely a lot of education and more needs to be done, definitely.
At the victim of discrimination at some point in my life. That's the pain that you do not forget. Anyway, I'm sorry, it emotional, it brings back a lot of memories. But anyway, do you feel that gay men have been accepted more than lesbian women in the history? Because I do remember more accepting or talking about gay men, but never lesbian later on. So that's why I'm asking that, it kind of came first, as
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, and it probably would be a great long discussion. I would just offer that sexism is alive and well, even in the LGBTQ movement, right? Even in the civil rights movement. And so it's not uncommon for men to feel their power first, right? And it's not uncommon for people in the culture at wide to recognize it. But I don't know that that means that gay men have been treated any.
Well, I agree, just they came out first, yeah.
Anyone else?
Just one thought. Thanks. Thanks you too, I was right. Maybe this is overly optimistic, but I think the gay community is going to be more and more accepted, but it's the transgender group that really is in for some hard times. So I don't have any great insights about how to deal with that, but I am shocked that someone could try and run for president basically by beating up on, transgender kids. That's where we were. So that's going to be a rough road that we get through.
Thank you, Christine. As we extinguish our chalice, let's remember to be kind, be brave, be just, be merciful, and be hopeful. This is how we keep the chalice flame burning until we're together again to light it anew. And I believe that we have a hymn that will come before I actually extinguish it. Thank you. Hymn number 346. I know I will distinguish the chalice, and I know that Ruth and Christie have some closing words.
I'm going to share with you the words of Reverend Rachel Small Stokes, who was a pastor at a UCC congregation in Kentucky. The Sparkle Creed. I believe in the non-binary God whose pronouns are plural. I believe in Jesus Christ, their child who wore a fabulous tunic, had 2 dads, and saw everyone as a sibling child of God. I believe in the rainbow spirit who shatters our image of one light and refracts it into a rainbow of gorgeous diversity. I believe in the church of everyday saints, as numerous, creative, and resilient as patches on the AIDS quilt, whose feet are grounded in mud and whose eyes gaze at the stars in wonder. I believe in the calling to each of us that love is loved. So beloved, let us love. I believe, glorious God, help my unbelief. Amen.
Thank Thank you all.